Hey, lovely people out there. I'm glad you could come and join us tonight. I'm very excited to bring to you, courtesy of Whiskey and Beards Publishing, as part of WinchesterFest 2020. I am here to bring you three more incredible artists that I had the absolute pleasure of meeting on the Apples and Snakes Arvon Retreat 2020. You've heard from the two Rachels, and you've heard from Miller, and today I bring you the fabulousness that is Elliot, Elspeth and Christy. So we're really glad you can stick around to join us. So our first performer, who we're going to ask a few questions to also, he's a 19-year-old poet from London. He's absolutely incredible. I mean, I can't believe he's only 19. His work is just wow. He deals with transmasculinity, he deals with mythology, lots of cool stuff like that. I mean, it's just, I can talk when I listen to his work, so that says all there is to say, really. So the first person that I'd like to welcome to our virtual stage is the wonderful, the incredible Elliot.
Hello.
Hey Elliot, thank you for joining us. So if it's all right with you, I have a few questions to ask you, so our viewers at home can get to know you a little bit better, and then we'll dive into the poetry set. So my first question is, what role does poetry play in your life?
So obviously it's an outlet, which is pretty important. Just a way of processing things a lot of the time. And I think, yeah, every time I come back to it, I always end up feeling extra grounded, which is always a pleasant experience. So I'd say that's the role that it plays.
Oh, that's such a good answer, man. I love being this side of the questions because I just get to hear all these wonderful answers. So how old were you when you first started performing poetry? Do you remember?
I think the first proper performance I did was at the Roundhouse Slam Poetry Poet Slam, the Roundhouse Slam in 2015, I think, which was an interesting experience. I was like really unexperienced, but it was good fun. Yeah.
Am I right in thinking you're an alumna of Roundhouse?
Of the Roundhouse Poetry Collective, yeah. Yeah, as of last year.
Fabulous. So how would you say your relationship then with poetry has sort of changed since your first performance up until now?
I definitely take it like more professionally now than I did then. I think I spend a lot more time on like the editing process and research and stuff like that, and just making sure I'm very careful and cautious with what I'm saying, as well as like making sure that I'm saying what I mean. So it's a lot more like thorough, I would say.
I mean, I have memories of you at Arbonne at like 2 a.m, still sat at the, like we're all chilling on the sofa and you're still sat at the computer doing stuff. So I mean, you have real dedication. Well, I guess
I think you're overestimating.
I mean, we all brought together because of the Arbonne. We're all brought together because of the Arvon Retreat. So I guess I should probably ask you a little bit about that. What did you enjoy most about the Arbonne Retreat? What was your best thing or things?
I would say, I think just having the space and time to write and just focus on it, which is an obvious answer, but yeah, I mean, I wanted to say like the staying up, like the nocturnal staying up till 5 a.m. stuff was pretty good as well. But
well, I mean, poets, we like to burn the candle at both ends. What can I say? I mean, it's kind of our vibe, really. So I believe you have some of your work to share with us.
I do, yeah. I have 3 poems.
Oh, fabulous. Would you like to take to the stage and share some of your work with us?
Yeah, sure thing.
Fabulous. Okay.
The first 2 are about swimming, I'm going to do like a very quick preamble, which is just I used to be a massive swimmer, and then being transgender and having gender dysphoria, I haven't been able to swim for a long time. And so I write about it a lot. So this first one's called Boys. I can only do backstroke if I'm out past the boys. I can only do breaststroke if I forget its name. My tongue dries in longing of lidos. My skin cringes. I'll shrink and shrink. Topless boys on beaches slip off their sand and drip with freedom. I front crawl out of waves, still caked in fucking shame. Thank you. This next one is called In Utopia, the water gives my body back. I can swim again. My hands prepare first, kneading the dough of the water, patting it, rolling it, pinching its pulse to check it is lucid. But I am impatient, and the water says dive. In this version, my torso is long and flat. The sun tears through into two scars on my chest that I choose. In this version, the water massages my muscles, pushes conquers over my sore skin. The water rolls round my skull like a marble. In this version, the water is my barber. He's saying, close your eyes. When I do, the water is pleasure red. Hands squeeze my roots. The clipper whirs in the rapids. When the water says surface, I'll nod to the water and place a £1 tip in its thick palm. The water says surface. In this version, I gasp for air with my chest. Light rushes into my wounds, the way water fills holes that a body has made. Light comes off everything. I blink into it. The water says ink it to your skin like squid. The water says sink. In this version, the water sings. I wait beneath for the mouths to come kiss me like Gara Rufa. The water is full of rough tongued stubble grazing like coral, lashes dark like damp oak. In this version, the boys wear silver fish and bling, and their eyes are chestnuts and sacred sin. We're bumping into each other like blind koi, like blood clots, like time lost. In this version, I don't hesitate. I have known this place, like palms know the ropes that burn it, like trees know rain on dry days. I will know this place someday. The water says, surface. Right, this last one, I feel like I should do a little bit of a warning, but I think this might be a slightly sensitive topic right now, which is grief. My lovely nanny, unfortunately, mixed bag of relief and grief, passed away around a month ago, and I wrote this for her. So if you if that's a sensitive topic for you, then 3 minutes is the length of this poem. Dear Nan, you taught many things, like how things can be so many different things at once. How buttered slices of bread dipped into eggs are also somehow soldiers. Or how your back garden was a hidden jungle where Louis and I were rolling boulders. How you taught me to read, so all my words now are short stories my mouth learnt from you when I was smaller. How the box of brooches you brought to infant schools helped many little voice boxes finding their first tools. So a box of brooches is also somehow a music box. How I am your grandson and also your granddaughter. How, when I was smaller, snow falling, I turned round and saw you, but also saw a God, unserious God, of boxes, train sets, gods of getting the cat to take her meds, of climbing up the staircase just to say how much you care, of putting us to bed. Sleep for mummy to buy a cow, God bless. How death can also be a final gift I watch my mum unwrap. So life is the last room you leave spotless, but filled with you, with stories, muddled notes. We are always finding you in boxes. Some might call it hoarding, but sentimental is by far the largest word you taught me. It is spring. Of the past, and we are so lucky to be loving you. Thank you. Hopefully my internet connection didn't go unstable through that. The screen was telling me that it did. But yeah.
I mean, poets, unstable. What are you on about? Oh man, no, that was absolutely brilliant. The imagery was just amazing. I'm sure everyone at home will agree with me. Everyone that's in the stream with us right now will agree. I was like checking the internet fervently the whole time, like, please don't cut out, please don't cut out. Like, but no, it was absolutely fine. That stream was absolutely fine. So just before we move on to our next poet, so you can have a bit of a relax. Whereabouts are you based for any of our viewers at home if they want to come see you perform?
I'm in London.
Based in London. Fabulous. And do you have any social media so our listeners can keep up to date with your poetry adventures?
The plug. Instagram is at Elliot Wallow. Is there anywhere I can put that which people can see it? I don't know. It's ELLIOTWALO.
Fabulous. When this video gets published up and on the page, we can add that in the comments or in the description. That's not a problem.
Cheers.
Fabulous. Okay, so I'll let you have a breather now. You can sit back, you can chill, drink some water, and I'll introduce our fellow Arvon poet. It is the one, the only, the incredible Elspeth. Hey, Elspeth, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
That's okay. So Elspeth, for those of you at home that might not know, I honestly have not met someone more organised in my life, and I had the absolute pleasure of doing some improv drama with Elspeth, and we were talking about, you know, what we feel a poem is and like how we feel poems reach the audience and stuff, and she was a fabulous person to work with. So she looks at ideas of gender, sexuality, disability. She's super smart. And yeah, so she is going to perform some of her work for us today, which is full of just beautiful imagery. And seriously, I love all these guys. I can't think of like anyone I would rather share a poetry retreat with, honestly. But just before we get into her work, we just have going to do a few questions so you get to know her a little bit better, get to know the poet behind the poems. So Elspeth, similar questions to Elliot. What role does poetry play in your life?
I think, yeah, poetry, especially at the moment, plays a massive role in kind of mental health and well-being for me. And this is something that I was talking to Rachel Lewis about this week, who is another of the Arvon poets who I think that you had on Whiskey and Beards recently, because we were talking about writing kind of from your own life, but writing emotions around joy and pleasure as well. And that's something that I've been trying to explore in my poetry more lately. So kind of the poetry of witness, but thinking about how to write happiness. And I guess just poetry is something very emotional for me as well. So it's something that I use as an outlet, as I'm sure lots of poets do, to kind of explore things. And sometimes things which seem almost inarticulable can come across through poetry. So I think at the moment, especially during this period, which is obviously really difficult for everyone, like poetry's a means of escape as well. And I think that's true, like whether a poem is shared with anyone or not, is just, yeah, for me, really important in terms of like happiness and finding like a way to kind of carve out a little bit of space for me in my day, and also a place where I can go somewhere else.
No, that's a really beautiful answer. Like, I'm finding the same. I don't know if you're finding with lockdown, like you just find time to write.
Yeah, I think for me, that's the silver lining of lockdown, is that I don't commute for like an hour each way every day. So I just have a little bit more space. But also at the same time, there's been days where I've literally felt the least creative I've ever felt in my whole life. So, you know, it's ups and downs, but definitely I think that at the moment, like just being able to write a poem about a particular moment or like a place that I miss has really helped me so much.
That's really good. It reminds me of something, I don't remember who said it, but someone said writers are never not working. Even if they're just sat staring into space, they are still working, which is something I always quite like. So then for you then, can you remember your first poetry performance?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, that's quite an easy one for me, because I haven't really been performing poetry for long at all. So probably the first time I performed was in October 2019, so about under a year ago still, and it was with Spread the Word, who are an amazing organisation. If anyone's not heard of them who's watching, who support artists in London, and they're really amazing. And I Teresa Lola, who's the Young Poets Laureate for London, organised a really special campaign about my mental health journey and mental health around young people. And I read a poem at an event that they organised, which was specifically on the theme of mental health. And it was a really lovely first poetry performance, to be honest. And it was quite like maybe a little bit in at the deep end, in the sense that it was, you know, I didn't know anyone there, and I just moved to London, and like I didn't really have any poetry community in that point in London, but I met some really lovely people, especially at Spread the Word. So it was really nice first performance.
Sorry about that. So I mean, I think it's right in saying that you do a lot of work that does talk about mental health and does talk about the psyche. Have you found that that's a way in for you quite often into your poetry, to kind of think about it through that kind of lens?
Yeah, I think so. I guess it comes back to what I was saying earlier. I do really like writing about that, but it's also, for me, important to think about the kind of whole journey and the whole range of emotions as well. So I do a lot of writing about mental health, but I also try and consider some of the more joyful aspects, especially as someone with disability and things, to kind of think about that too, because otherwise I think that especially for marginalized people, we can end up being a bit pigeonholed and only writing about a certain aspect of ourselves and not necessarily writing kind of the joy and pleasure in our lives as well. So that's something I'm mindful of, and also think something that everyone at Arvon really taught me, because there was so many, like such a huge range of poems about different things. So definitely I think mental health was a way in, and it's still something, a theme that I think comes up again and again in my work, as well as embodiment. But it's something that I'm kind of mindful of, I guess, just having that as an important part of it, but thinking about what else I can do with my poetry as well.
So I guess then, would you say then that your relationship with poetry has changed quite a lot since your first performance?
I think it has, because I think when I came to poetry at first, I was using it to explore a lot of stuff about embodiment for myself and like work through some things. But I think that now, because of amazing things like the writing room and stuff, I have a lot more kind of, I guess, like tools in the chest, as it were. So I think my relationship with poetry, there's still that drive there, and I'm still really fascinated by that question, I think, which really drives a lot of my work, but it's kind of like, how do we live in a body and how do we make it a home? But I think that it has come a long way, and I think that at the moment especially, I'm really challenging myself to be thinking, like, how do we write and translate joy and those small moments we have, and the kind of like things which are maybe seen as a bit mundane, into poetry. And I think that's obviously, you know, there's been a movement around that in poetry as well. So yeah, just kind of trying to still continue to learn new things, which I'm doing all the time, but definitely would say, yeah, it's been a big journey and it's changed quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, no, I feel you. And honestly, the amount that you've already achieved in what is, you know, relatively a short window is just phenomenal. Like, so on that note, do you have some of your work that you'll be sharing with us tonight?
I do. Yeah, I do. I have a few poems. I'll read a few and see how far we how I'm doing for time. The first one that I've got is actually one that I wrote at Arvon, and it's the one, like the sort of main poem that I wrote at Arvon. So I thought that might be nice to share.
Oh, before we start, sorry, would you mind telling us, just because I'm curious, what was your best thing about Arbonne?
Oh, that's really hard. I think I loved the last night. I mean, I know you mentioned it when you were chatting with Elliot earlier, and this sort of like staying up till 2 a.m. But I was so exhausted throughout Arbonne that I didn't stay up till 2 a.m. apart from the last night. But I really enjoyed that. And it was just really fun and kind of just really special. And when we were kind of chatting about trash TV, and we were talking about Riverdale and all the other rubbish TV programs we watched, I really loved that. And I've written a poem about Riverdale since then. So yeah, so you inspired me. And I think just the sense of community, and especially like, I really like the fact that I feel like people really met everyone where they were at, if that makes sense. Like, I was going through a really hard time actually when Arvon was on, and like I was feeling quite dissociated and like not really that close to myself, and I think was probably a little bit standoffish because of that. But I think like no one, like everyone was just still like super friendly and kind, and like I think there was a genuine, like, people talk a lot about safe spaces in literature, right? But I think that can sometimes not manifest itself in how safe they actually feel. But I did really genuinely feel really safe with all of you at Arvon, so that was really good.
Oh, that's so lovely to say. No, I felt totally the same. And I mean, it is quite a difficult thing. Like, you get people that haven't, I mean, I know some of you had, but you get people that haven't met each other before, and you kind of throw them into a house together. I mean, it's kind of like Big Brother, but with, you know, poet emotions everywhere. So, you know, it's an interesting environment for sure. So yeah, when you're ready, would you like to take to the virtual stage?
Cool. Okay, so this first poem is called I Still Feel. The scalloped edge of the bra means the Roman sun burns my skin into a wave pattern. Once we were on the beach we had made from the sandbox in your garden. Once your boobs sat in this bra, not quite filling it, an electric gap between you and the lace. The lawn had been mowed, sweet smell escaping. We tried each other out for size, my pasty flesh spilling out your bikini top as we sat in the dappling sun of your patio. Your mother inside the house, hoping its tidy perfection would rub off on her mind. Your father trampling across the grass cuttings, leaving upon seeing the sight of us, declaring he didn't want a heart attack at 40. Free of those oppressive white walls, we laughed and laughed, our torsos shaped around each other like cuttings bent for a trellis. Now my burn still aches with the touch of you, my skin less hot from the sun than when your fingers left their mark upon it. Thank you.
That's still one of my favorites. I'm so happy you put it in the anthology.
Yeah, I was really pleased with that poem. I played around the title and stuff a bit, but I just that's like a poem I wrote about one moment, which I really enjoyed writing. So yeah, I guess for me, the process of writing that was really nice. The next poem I'm going to write is a newer one. So yeah, this is one I wrote during lockdown. And it's called Wildfires Burn Across Australia as Edward Cullen takes his top off for the 20th time. 1,000 miles away, a country burns as we decide it is time for a twilight marathon. Silvery moon, cold skin in my heart as Bella moves from Phoenix, Arizona, making me see climate refugees even in my YA. We cannot see the flames, like bees we are asleep, smoked out, impervious to our home dissolving. Jacob says to Edward, I'm hotter than you, which is true, but not all things that are true are heard. New moon, breaking dawn, light still crawling, but as the sun cracks its yolk on our popcorn husks, the dead weight in my stomach is undying. I am uncored an apple, wishing its pips will be seeded, frying ground in which to live, that the venomous bite of rubbish, of sewage, of the crushed snail, of the dead wasp on the pavement is not eternal, that the sharp pains in my chest will be eclipsed by action, my own included, and it was okay, forgive me, to watch Bella and Edward get their happy ending whilst a country burned. Thank you. Cool, okay. The next one I'm going to read was one that was published recently in a magazine called Malefaction, which is actually a really interesting magazine if anyone wants to look it up, because it's specifically about crime writing, but they're kind of looking at crime writing in like a slightly different way, and especially obviously like crime and thrillers, a genre which has been quite dominated by tropes which are quite harmful to a lot of marginalized groups basically. But this magazine is kind of subverting that, and their first issue is based around the kind of concept of the femme fatale, which is obviously like has been kind of like weaponized against a lot of marginalized people over time. But they have it's just really interesting the way that they're kind of looking at crime, and they also accept poetry. It's a really good place submit if anyone's looking for submissions, because I think it's really interesting to think about poetry as part of crime and thriller writing, because obviously that's not normally how we would think about it. So so this poem was published in their first issue, and it is called Circe Makes a Sunday Roast. On Sundays, I roast my pain until it is edible, tucking it behind the Yorkshire puddings that I hate and have been made by my hands for generations. Sitting next to beef, not pork. Looking decorative, I sit like a bruise upon a morning face, as you say that you are laughing with me, not at me. I often find that men do things at me, not with me. Now divorces can happen online. I touch my belly like it is a ripe nectarine, knowing I will call my daughter Lilith and then eat her, because to be fresh blood is better than to be roasted. Asking myself, can there be any stories if poets do not make us weep? I slough the pain off my insides, laminating it in pastry to feed the hankering mouths who see no danger in domesticity. So that poem, it made me think that it's really cool that you write about mythology, Elliot, because I don't normally write about mythology, but that poem was inspired by the fact that Circe the witch turns the men who come to her island to pigs. So that's why I wrote that poem. Do I have time to read one more, Laura, or is that time now? Okay, cool. I think I've got the go ahead. Cool. So I'll just read this one last poem, which I wrote last week in a really good series, a good workshop, which was run by the Young Poets Network. And I think that the Young Poets Network, if anyone is interested, is actually at the moment about to run a series of 6 workshops, all for free or via Zoom, which look like they'll be really cool. And you can apply to get a place on those workshops and work throughout all of them. So yeah, if anyone wants to do that, I think you'll just find the details on their website. But the workshop that I went to was about golden shovels, which is a kind of form that I won't do a good job of explaining now, but basically you use a line from a different poem or song or book or whatever, and you use the last word, the last word of each line has to correspond to the sentence that you're using. And I wrote a golden shovel, which was using the headline, "Bats can learn to copy sounds, and it may teach us about human speech." So that was the prompt. And this poem doesn't have a title yet, but it is about going to spot bats. So, stood in the gloaming, our eyes searched for bats. Comb the sky, left it jagged with your gaze. I thought, we can do this. We can learn to change ourselves from the outside in, to treat the blank space between us with kid gloves. No, we don't have to copy our fathers, although we may pity them. High-pitched sounds hit my ears and made them ache, although it was not the squeal of bats. It may have escaped your lips like a shush does to teach us to keep our shadows small, to tell us how to fold in on ourselves like a comma, to tell us about survival and what it means to be human when people spend millions of pounds on bat research, bat radars, but cannot hear your voice, your speech. So yeah, I think I'll just leave it there for now, but thank you very much for having me and letting me read.
Oh, no problem. I love how you managed to research something, and it's something really, really interesting. But then you managed to not only turn that into such beautiful poetry, but you managed to portray it in such a way that everyone can access it, everyone can understand what you're talking about, but you don't make it sound, like it's something inaccessible to people. And that's what I think I really love about your work. Like I really enjoy it. I'm really in the poem, but I also learn something.
Oh, that's really kind. Thank you so much.
Which I really, really like that about your work. I love how at Arvon we were all so different, but everyone is just so talented, so talented. So whereabouts then are you based at the minute? I know you mentioned London, so I'm guessing you're also based in London?
Yeah, so I'm usually based in London. I'm in Scotland at the moment because of lockdown. So I'm back with my parents. But yeah, usually based in London. So any performances that might be in person when we're allowed to do that will likely to be in London.
And so do you have any social media? So people at home that want to follow you social media wise, do you have any links that they can follow you on?
Yeah, so I mostly use Twitter, and my handle on Twitter is at Ellie, ELLIJ, just the letter J, Wilson. And yeah, and if anyone's interested, myself and Rachel Lewis, who was hosted by yourselves before, we're running a workshop specifically on writing happiness this coming Saturday at 11 a.m. as part of the Stay at Home Literature Festival. So yeah, if anyone wants to spend an hour on their weekend just thinking about how to kind of include joy and pleasure in your work, if any of what I said upon that touched upon you, then do come along.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. I've already put it in my diary, so I'm really hoping to be able to come.
Oh, I hope you can make it, but yeah.
Thank you. So what we're going to do is we're going to let Elspeth have a little break so you can get some water and relax. And we're going to bring up to the stage, please. We're going to bring the fabulous Christy, everyone. I'm very excited. So Christy, well, what can I say? So they were a finalist in BBC Words First last year, which is awesome. So for those of you that don't know, I also did BBC Words First last year, and I had absolutely no idea that Christy got to the final until she told me. So that was super exciting. She's an alumna, I want to say, of Roundhouse 2, but I'm not sure of that.
Barbican Young Poets, Roundhouse.
Barbican young poets. They're all around fabulous, really. I mean, I haven't seen anyone yet. I mean, that's not to say they don't exist, but I haven't seen any poet that manages to talk about like quantum freaking physics and mathematics, like really complicated mathematic algorithms, and incorporate it into poetry and just make it sound so beautiful. Like, I don't remember my maths teacher doing that at school. Like, so yeah, I'm really, really, really excited to have Christy here with us. So it's really good that you're here. So for
Thanks for having me.
No problem. So for you, what role does poetry play in your life?
Oh, it's a massive, massive part of my life. It's now become kind of, to explain it in a very poetic way, like it's not only the foundation of my life, it's also the whole house, the structure, the furniture, the kitchen. It's every part of my life in every aspect, really. It's how I make friends, it's how I get work, it's how I process and think things through. Yeah, it's massive.
It's like, I remember one time I was at a party and there was a lot of new people there, and we were talking about like 3 adjectives that we would use to describe us, and I said poet, and like I had a few people that were like, yeah, but that's not an adjective, that's a job, like, you know, that's a thing, that's a noun. And I'm like, no. So I completely understand where you're coming from. So do you remember when you first started performing poetry, or are you more a page poet, or?
I do both page and on the stage. I remember my first time performing was at some sort of like spoken word event held at my university. So a bunch of my friends had set up like a spoken word society at my uni. And I remember, I think, performing my first ever piece to quite a small group. That was really exciting. And then during that time, I was mostly still like watching and learning and just like kind of getting familiar with how things are performed. And then in 2016, I moved to London. And then that's when I started doing more of the open mics and more performing then.
So how would you say then, so 2016 is quite a while ago, and before that, so you've been doing this for quite a while, how would you say that your kind of relationship with poetry has changed since your earlier days?
I'd say it's really deepened. It's gone beyond just kind of like me trying to express myself. It's been a real powerful way for me to like connect with other people, connect with a deeper level of myself, figure out and process things that have happened to me now or like have happened beforehand. And also it's just opened up a lot of different avenues and potentials and just like different pathways. Like I've ended up being able to do things that I've never thought I would be able to do before because of poetry. Like I managed to do like a show at the Barbican Centre in collaboration with Boy Blue Entertainment, which was like a theatre, dance, spoken word show thing that ran on for 3 nights. And like I didn't know that was possible or that like I could do it. So it's been really amazing that like it's opened up all these doors for me.
And you know, one of those doors being the Apples and Snakes Arvon Retreat 2020. So you know, the question that you know is on everybody's lips is, no, this is, it isn't, but on the question on my lips is, what was your favorite thing about the Arvon Retreat 2020?
Such a hard question. It was just such a beautiful experience. It was just so wonderful. It's hard to pin down just like one thing as a top thing, but like I think just kind of like living and being around poets and so many different poets across the country for such a long time was just like such a valuable experience. Be able to like live with and cook with and eat with and talk and spend late nights chatting and sharing work and just being surrounded in that environment, that community where we're all taking our work seriously and we all take each other seriously as artists as well. That was really valuable and really precious. Something I miss you all. You're all so beautiful.
Oh man, I don't know if you had the same thing as me, but I found myself like just before I went to bed, I'd like be getting ready for bed and I'd just be thinking to myself, man, like I can't believe I'm here. Like I'm at a place where there's been so many incredible poets, so many famous writers have been through these doors, and like now I'm here at a retreat like just writing for a week. Like I had to pinch myself a little bit.
It's mad. We're kind of part of this like lineage now, which is crazy.
Oh man. And the fact that we got to write an anthology as well. So I'm hoping we will get to publish that somewhere eventually. But yeah, all the work that everybody put into that was incredible. So what I'm going to do is now I am going to, stop talking for a while. And I believe you have some work to share with us.
I do.
Fabulous. Okay, so can we please welcome Christy to the virtual poetry stage?
Hello everyone. So as Laura mentioned, so ironically I'm not actually that good at maths, but I'm like always been fascinated with like physics, specifically space stuff. And I was reading Reality is Not What It Seems, which is written by Carl Covelli, I think that's how you pronounce it, sorry. And a theory really grabbed at me. So I actually wrote this and shared this at Arbonne. So I thought it was very fitting to share this, but it's called the law of falling bodies, which is the law that objects will fall at 9.8 meters per second. So it gets faster as it falls. So it'll fall at 9.8 meters per second in the first second, and then it'll be squared in the next second, and it'll just increase. That's kind of all the science you need to know for this poem. And it's like combined with classic heartbreak and science, just merging that together. So this is the law of falling bodies. Galileo says earthly bodies roughly fall at 9.8 meters per second, that every descending body follows a law. You believe us superior and above it all, that outsmarting gravity is our reckoning. Galileo says earthly bodies roughly fall, gradually increasing speed, answering the call of ground-seeking prodigal returns, beckoning that every descending body follows a law. I started falling faster than you did. I saw the end coming first and the approach lessening. Galileo says earthly bodies roughly fall. All these heavenly bodies and our earthen cores moved by the same gravity and same connection that every descending body follows a law. I have hit the ground, walked away. Do you still fall, mistaking it for flight? Have you learnt this lesson? Galileo says earthly bodies roughly fall, that every descending body follows a law. Thank you. I can see people's applause in the little thumbnails. It's well cute. So I'm just going to read a quick one from this one. So it's the Use First anthology, as mentioned earlier. There's 12 of us in this, which is kind of mad and amazing and beautiful. Also, Saf, who joined us for Arbonne. None of us knew each other were going to the event, so we just saw each other on the stairs at Arbonne, like, oh my gosh, it's you. But we're both in this book. I love Saf. Saf is great. So this one I'm going to share is called Hold a Funeral for Our Old Selves. And it's after a poem written by the powerhouse that is Joelle Taylor. The line that inspired it was, everything you've ever lost is here, which she wrote, and that just really stuck with me for years. So here's Hold a Funeral for Your Old Self. Give flowers, dress for mourning, shoulder your own casket, walk slowly. Let the weight go. Hold a minute of silence, then let it all burn. Give yourself permission to grieve. Share anecdotes and memories, laugh at your life. Read old diaries like wills. Sort old dreams like inheritances, decide what to keep. Ashes to ashes, dust to stardust. Understand that paths birth back to a universe made of us. Clasp your ashes until it's cold, until you are a diamond in your own palm. Sleep for 3 days, then roll back the stone. Look in the mirror, repeat this. I am here now. I am enough. Fun fact, Joelle Taylor actually read this poem while sat right next to me, which was terrifying. But she really liked it. So
no, that was beautiful. And fun fact for you, actually, Joelle Taylor, she's a good friend of the Whiskey and Beers publishing family. So she's actually read quite a few of our books and has either done the foreword or she's written a comment on the back for the blurb. So yeah, we're a massive fan of Joelle.
Oh, I'm such a huge fan. I love her. I think she's phenomenal.
I remember I was gutted because she came to my hometown and she did a gig last year, and she messaged me on Facebook asking, like seeing if I was about, and I had to be like, I'm really sorry, I'm in Spain at the moment, so I'm not able to show you around. I was gutted. I was so excited because I wanted to be able to show her. Wanted to show her just like everything I could about my hometown. But yeah. Do you have any more wonderful poetry for us? Because that was phenomenal.
Am I doing this for time? How much do I
have?
have?
Yeah, you're doing absolutely fine for time. You have up to 10 minutes if you'd like.
Amazing. I shall continue. Give me a bell if I'm coming up to like 2 minutes or so, just so I don't overrun. Right. So here's another breakup poem. So this was written after listening to Melodrama by Lorde, which is one of my absolute favorite albums of all time. It's called Small Print for Heartache. That was the deal, kid. It was in the small print when you signed up for falling in love. Music will sound different. Seemed like a bonus, right? You felt all music had been made for you. All the moon rivers, the all of me's, the call me maybes. You woke up next to him and asked, how do these songs know about us? But here's the thing. The small print applies when love ends, because you also signed up for the Heartbreak Hotels, the Starlight Hues, the Back to Blacks, and every damn Ed Sheeran song. You now understand how guitar strings are plucked like they can pull him back, how harmonies are built as the future falls apart. You haven't listened to music in a week in case you start crying and you're so sick of that discord. Or worse, in case you don't feel anything at all. You think you will never hear a note again. Music knew your love. It knows you're lost too. So play everything. All the songs he loved, the ones he hated, especially the ones he hated. The tracks you said you didn't like either, but you'd mouth every word in the dark. Scream the words silently because everyone else has gone to bed and you haven't told them the news yet. You'll find music coming out your own mouth when you haven't spoken for days. Dance your way back to yourself. If you feel guilt for feeling joy, dance harder in your bedroom, ballroom, and the laptop glow. Move with your shadow. Your darkness has always been with you. It is proof you are a solid, living thing. Slow dance with its absence until you are holding your own arms. Dance like you forgive yourself. Hey. I know. You thought you'd be done with crying at this point. Nothing is going to sound the same, but you get that now. Honey, listen. Can you hear it? It's the whole world. Thank you. I see all your little faces, and I love it. I love seeing your little faces. This next one is called The Revolution. It's a teenage girl. I think my friend Jen Howe's watching is one of their favorites. So this is for you. The revolution is a teenage girl. Girls sound like birds when they laugh. It angers men to hear it. They're so afraid to not know what we're laughing at, they throw stones until we scatter. But we know the sharpness of milk teeth, how it's all the better to bite back with. And we're coming for you. Because that crown looks better on us, even if it's a little too big. You say we're too young to know anything, so why are we old enough to know how to hide when a shooting comes to our schools? How men eat our bodies whole, serve us death like we ordered it. How this world burns while you crush coal, spit diamonds, count coins, and let us eat chaos. And we are terrified. You are the monsters under our beds. You've sent us to more funerals than birthday parties. No one taught us how to carry the world, but we have to take it from you. We have to. We're building placards and rebellions in our bedrooms over pizza and pop music, and somehow we're still laughing. Because girls sound like birds when they laugh, and when you hear bird song, you know dawn is coming. Okay, this is my final one.
That was beautiful.
Oh.
Ah.
Thank you. We're just going to do one more quick one. It's actually written after a poem my friend wrote called Abreast. She's called Annie Hayter. So her poem is about how she used to have a mole on her right breast, and she got it removed just for some testing, and like it's all fine, she's all fine, but like she still missed it because it was still a part of her that was taken away. And she wrote a poem about that, and it was really beautiful. And I ended up writing one in response to that. It's kind of for her because she's great and I love her very much. So it's for the scar on her right breast for Annie Hayter. The underside of the cut, a new surface, a clearing, an excavation. Like your love just had to seep out, a tenderness, a birth, a bite. I hoped someone had nibbled you, someone good enough this time. But it was the doctor's knife that bit, uncovering the mole to reveal no cancer. But if the scar is a victory flag, is the mole collateral damage because you miss it? Even as it discolored, it was a part of you to be held to your chest. In the doctor's jar, you can see what went wrong with the piece of you, if anything, what's right with the whole of you, everything. All angels shed feathers, light, dust.
Oh, that was beautiful, Christy. Thank you. What I think is the best thing about that is like we didn't really get to see everyone's work at Arvon. Like we did, but like we didn't really get to hear lots of poems by people, which is what I've mainly enjoyed about doing these series, is actually getting to hear more of the poets' works. And just that whole set was just incredible, and I'm so glad you did your poem also that you wrote at Arbonne, or one of the poems that you wrote at Arbonne, because that's also one of my favorites. So just a couple of things then, Christy. So if not this one, okay, apologies. Whereabouts are you based at the minute? I'm guessing you're also in London, from what you were saying to us earlier, but just want to clarify.
Yep. I am in London indeed.
And do you have any social media links so that our listeners can follow you and kind of see what poetry stuff you get up to?
So I'm at Kuka Doodles, which is a play on my surname. So it's Kuka Doodles with an S. I'm on that. That's the same handle across literally everything. Instagram
makes life easier.
Even TikTok, guys. I'm down with the cool kids. So yeah, I'm most active on Instagram, Twitter at the moment. So
I have to admit, I'm a fan of Instagram as well. I actually felt really bad because I deleted my Snapchat about a year ago because I just wasn't using it. And I was just like, I felt too old for Snapchat. I feel like for our generation, Instagram's like our vibe, that's our home. So a massive thank you to all of the wonderful poets that took part in the showcase today. You've all been brilliant. You all have such different strengths, but man, they are such freaking strengths. Like, I felt really honoured to be hosting you guys tonight. Just the work you produce, the community work you guys do, just how you made me feel tonight, how you made the audience feel. Just thank you ever so much for being here. Sincerely, like, wow, you guys were, as the kids would say, fire emojis everywhere. So just to finish off, we're going to open up the board just to have a little bit of a group discussion, if that's all right with everyone, just to bring this event to a close. So I don't know if we can we get Elspeth unmuted, please, Connor?
Hey, yeah, I'm unmuted.
Okay, we can hear everyone now. Fabulous. Okay, so I have a few questions that are open to the floor. So maybe can we go as can we do gallery view? There we go. Okay, so to everybody, have you got any projects that you're currently working on? And if so, what are they? No one wants to go first.
Well, because I think we might be in slightly different order on different Zoom accounts.
I'll start then. That makes sense. I'm currently working on kind of a big project which the working title is roughly male or rough male, but I'm not sure. The thing that's a bit more concrete is I'm working on anthology, and I think the title is going to be The Time I Front Crawled Out of the Buff. So that's what I'm currently doing. Yeah. That's some art and stuff.
Oh, fab. And I remember, like, whenever you weren't writing, you were doodling, and your sketches are just really good. So I really think, publish some of those on your Instagram. Let the world see them, not just us, everybody.
Multimedia now, it's the way.
I'm a multimedia artist. So let's fly over to Elspeth then. Elspeth, have you got any projects you're currently working on?
Yeah, so I'm doing more prose at the moment than poetry in terms of a project. So I've got writing a novel at the moment, which is kind of what is keeping me going through lockdown. And then in terms of poetry, I'm slowly working my way towards a pamphlet, which I touched upon, I think, at Arbonne, kind of specifically looking at some of the things that I was talking about before, kind of around writing around joy and disability, but also trauma. So yeah, it's a mix. And I'm trying to be a bit more experimental in some of the forms that I'm using in that. So that's been interesting as well, but that's kind of a slow project. And I think, very much ongoing.
Fabulous. I can't wait. You have to tell me all when you publish these things, because I want to read all of them. I want to buy all of them, and I want to read all of them. Okay? So Christy, can you tell us, what projects are you currently working on?
I always have probably too many projects on the go, but to kind of highlight two, I'm doing some prose work as well. So I'm kind of drafting up this kind of excerpt for a novel thingy for a competition, and then hopefully progress from that and turn it into a real full thing. It's very Shirley Jackson inspired, who's one of my favorite writers. So it's kind of like a bit weird and spooky, but in a good way, I guess. And the second one is also a poetry pamphlet, where it will hopefully blend my love of space and science and all that good stuff with kind of like love and loss and kind of just being at this age and all them themes.
Oh man, I can't wait to read it. I'm so excited. I'm living vicariously through all of you. So what are things I want to ask you guys? Yeah, this is a question I asked at the first Arvon showcase, actually, and it's a question that it's a personal favorite of mine, because I find it really interesting to see people's answers. So if poetry was a person, what 3 adjectives would you use to describe them?
I'm going to go for dual, and hard to get, and I can't think of a third. There you go. I'm going to give, those are my 2 adjectives. Breaking the rules. Rule breaking, there you go.
Oh, fabulous. What about you, Elspeth?
I would go for moody, caring, and demanding, I think, probably.
Demanding. That one, relatable. I have so many poems that I just are half finished, and they're like, the only time I actually finish anything is when I have a submission, or when Connor, my publisher, is like, have you finished blah blah blah, and I'm like, oh, I probably should finish that. Oh. What about you, Christy? What 3 adjectives would you describe poetry with if poetry was a person?
So think about this, so I wrote them down. I wrote indeterminate, familiar, and eternal.
Ooh. Yeah, I think that's the thing with poetry. Like, once you write it, it's in the world, So I think I definitely have kind of personal poems that I write just for me to get kind of the emotions out that I need to process. But definitely then they're not ones that I perform. You know, would you guys say you're kind of familiar with that as well? Like, there's certain poems that you've written and you need to write them, but like you don't want to perform them.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've got one poem that I've performed, and I performed it throughout the Words First thing. It's very emotionally taxing for me, so I rarely perform that nowadays, just because it's such a toll.
What about you, Elspeth? Are there any poems that you've written that you're just like?
Yeah, I think there's some poems that I write for me and I don't think about some of the things that I might think about if I was interested in sharing them elsewhere. Like, does this form suit this poem, and am I happy about what I've done with delineation, that kind of thing. I think there's some which I write more just for me, if that makes sense. And I think poetry can be quite hungry in different ways, and sometimes it wants to be shared, and sometimes it's more something that it like needs to be out, but when it's out you can leave it, or that's how it feels to me, if that makes sense.
You guys have given such good answers. I'm so happy. I had like stuff written down where I was like, if I need to fluff, I can use this stuff, and I just haven't needed to use it, which is just great. What else do I want to ask you guys? Yeah, so I have 2 more questions, if that's all right, before I let you go, B. What I'd like to ask you is, are there any poets out there that you would wholeheartedly recommend our listeners to go listen to or read, or even artists? Are there any creatives out there that you would recommend for our audience?
I'm just going to go for Moses Sumney, absolutely incredible artist. Listen to Lonely World. It's a work of...
Hello?
Am I still there? Hello?
Yeah,
you're back with us now. Yeah.
I said Moses Sumney, Lonely World, poet, artist, incredible. There you go.
The adjectives. Thank you, Elliot. And what about you, Christy? Are there any poets out there, or creatives in general, that you would wholeheartedly recommend? Oh, you are prepared.
I'll whiz through them real quick. Tom Denby released his debut, and then She Ate Him. Fantastic. She Too Is a Sailor by Antonia Jade King. I love. Caitlin Seal, American-based legend. Love her. Gabriel Akamo and Troy Kabida had the joint launch very recently. I adored them both. Fantastic. Also, Jacob Sam Rose, the legend, the almighty. We love.
Fabulous. Definitely send these across after, or when we post the video, so that our readers can read them as well if they need to, because that list just sounds incredible. Actually, Tom was in the same heat as me for the Words First last year, and yeah, he's a super cool being. So yeah, thank you for sharing the collection with us. Elspeth, what about you? Are there any poets or creators that you would wholeheartedly recommend our listeners to check out?
I absolutely love Francesca Beer. She's an amazing facilitator, but she's also just a wonderful person and very, very funny, which I think comes across in her work. She writes some prose as well, some plays. It does a lot of work with and for communities, and like does just the most amazing shows, and I think has an amazing sense of play as well, which is really cool. Then I love Liz Berry's The Republic of Motherhood. I think it's a really amazing pamphlet. I really like Hera Lindsay Bird's work, especially Pyramid Scheme is one of my favorite poems ever. And in terms of thinking about some Scottish poets, Nadine Aisha Jassett's Let Me Tell You This is really good, and published by 404 Inc., who are a really interesting publisher to have a look at.
Okay. Thank you for sharing, everybody, and thank you for giving us such a wide range of recommendations. Like, I was sat here thinking, I wonder if they'll say anything any artists that are the same as the last Articulating Arvon event, and all different ones, which is really fantastic. Like, I'm really glad that you are all consuming artistic work as much as you're producing, which I think is something something good for artists to do to support each other, especially, you know, in the current climate we're in. So my final question of the evening, before I let you all go and be free, is what advice would you give to someone who is either struggling or procrastinating or has writer's block? They're just thinking, oh man, I really want to write, but I feel like I can't. What advice would you give them to try and write something?
I feel like it's definitely different strokes for different folks, but I think for me, like, just doing a free write is always good. It's like hard to get into it. Like, I still don't have a proper like schedule for doing it, but some people do, and that's really helpful for them. I think reading always helps. Like, it just unlocks so much. And going for a walk, getting some fresh air, just living your life is sometimes you don't have to put so much pressure on yourself, and everything you do is art. So
That's such a beautiful answer. I agree with you with the free writes for sure. Like, I remember at the retreat, I love free writing, but I like kind of being told, which sounds really weird, but like I sometimes don't have the kind of make the time to do a free write on my own, because I think, oh, I need to do this for this, or I need to do that, and I kind of don't make the time. But actually things
some Twitters which do like writing prompts.
Yeah, no, I find those really useful. I either ask my mum to give me writing prompts. I'll just be like, Mum, can you give me like 3 nouns, and I'll write a poem about it. Or just, yeah, going to online workshops, which obviously there's been a lot of them during quarantine, which has been great. Having someone tell you, like, this is your prompt, you have 10 minutes, go. And I find that really, really helpful myself.
Sure.
So what about you, Christy? What would you say as advice for someone who wants to write but feels at the moment they can't?
So basically, I think, I can't remember who said this, but you can't edit a blank page. Sometimes just hacking your way through it and taking it one word at a time and just getting it down, and then not focusing whether it's good or not, just getting it done. So then you have something to actually work with and material to mold with as well. Also, just kind of like procrastination and writer's block often comes from a place of fear, and I find it really useful to just kind of like address that bit and figure out, what are you actually afraid of? Why are you so afraid? What actually is scaring you? And then coming to terms with that, and then figuring out how to handle that fear, and not necessarily like push it away, but kind of sit with it, and yeah, let yourself move with the fear, basically.
That's such good advice. Like, ride it like a wave. Beautiful, beautiful. And so, Elspeth, to finish us off then for that question, what advice would you give to someone who's struggling to write at the moment and wants to?
Yeah, I think that was such amazing advice from Christy and Elliot. I'm not sure what I have to add. I would really echo all of that. And I think just to build on it, I think be really kind to yourself, especially at the moment, and non-pressurized. And I think it's easy if you're trying to write, especially towards a long form project, you want to kind of start a pamphlet or a collection, to put pressure on yourself to work on that particular thing. But I think sometimes if you're struggling, as Christy said, it can be about fear. And I think that writing sideways about something just to get you back into writing can be really good. So try writing about something totally different or completely outside your comfort zone. And like, I think with writing, literally nothing is ever wasted. Like Elliot said, everything you do is art, and like there's no such thing as something which doesn't like feed into other things you do. I think if you're at the moment, if you're kind of craving structure, I completely agree. Second or third, I guess, that prompts can be really useful. And just like using, like, you can try and give yourself a guided free write. Like if you kind of just put like a timer on to stop you every 2 minutes or so, and like close your eyes and point to another word on the page, and then use that, I think could be a really good way of doing it, and just kind of seeing where you go and being open.
No, I think that's all such brilliant advice. Definitely much better than anything I could come up with if I had to answer these questions, which is why I'm really glad I'm behind them and not not receiving them. So just before we finish off then, is there anything that you guys would like to plug? Any events coming up, or any events that your friends are hosting, or kind of anything related to online workshops, anything like that? I know Elspeth mentioned her workshop coming up earlier, but anything you wanted to mention before we bring this to a close?
I think I'm good. If anyone wants to send me anything, then just like DM me any opportunities, please.
I actually, speaking of which, I actually came across a really interesting opportunity the other day. I don't know if you guys have heard of Adalia Day, but she has this amazing project that they're starting where it's going to be like spoken word videos but animated. I'm not sure exactly what the finished product's meant to be, but it sounds really cool. So definitely you guys should check that out on their website, because it looks really interesting. I unfortunately don't think I have time to prepare the submission for it, unfortunately, but if you guys have the time, I totally recommend.
Thank you.
Recommend that project. No problem. Elspeth, Christy, is there anything you'd like to share before we finish?
Do you want to go first, Elspeth, or shall I?
As you want, as you guys want. I don't mind.
You go first, Christy.
Okay. So Bad Betty Press have released these two wonderful people, Gabriel Akamo and Troy Kabida. Please do buy their pamphlets. Also, just follow me on mostly Instagram, I'd say, and then you'll keep up to date with all the shenanigans I get up to.
Elsa?
Yeah, I just made a website, so if anyone wants to look at my snazzy new website, it's elsbethwilson.co.uk. Also, just to say, I'm lucky enough to have some time to do volunteering, to be able to take some time off to do volunteering. So if anyone is part of a community group or a charity and they'd be interested in having a writing workshop done for them, particularly in isolation, where people might be feeling a bit lonely or like they could do with something creative, I'd be very happy to talk that through with you, because as I say, I've got some time to do that on a voluntary basis at the moment. So if that would help anyone, then do reach out to me. And otherwise, I've got a free writing workshop coming up this Saturday at 11, as I mentioned.
I'll definitely, even if I don't manage to come, Elspeth, I'll definitely give it a share on my artist page. So hopefully people can see it and they will come along. So once again, thank you ever so much for being here. I was totally mesmerized by your work. I was so excited about this lineup because like the stuff that you guys focus on is so different to each other that I knew it was just going to be like an incredible journey where we go to so many different locations, and you guys fucking delivered. What can I say? It was absolutely brilliant. So thank you ever so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's okay. And obviously, thank you to everyone at home for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed it. This has been Articulating Arbonne, round 2. And yeah, stay safe, look after yourselves, and check out these guys' poetry and any poetry that we mentioned in this event, because it's all fabulous, really.